Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Awesome. All right. So I think we got it working and we took care of the feedback problem. I have no idea what that was about.
Yeah.
But if you're just joining us or haven't joined us yet, we are doing this. Hopefully you've seen the post from Monday and yesterday about us having again our guest this week, as it is National Infertility Awareness Week. And I just thought it was important, or we thought it was important to, bring to light what this week is about, why this week was started, how it impacts and affects people in our lives, maybe even some of us who are either part of this page and this group, or even, again, our friends and friends of friends. And so we're just grateful to have you all here tonight. And we are, I think, going to get started because we've been having some challenges with the Facebook Live. So we want to get started. I know it's getting late. And so we don't want to delay anymore. So, um, so I, again, introduced Kendall. If you don't know, this is, again, Kendall Bassard. And I'm going to just read her bio just so you all can get a better sense of who she is. Again, if you didn't see the post or get a chance to read it. So Kendall Bassard is a licensed mental health counselor who uses a holistic approach to support a wide array of therapeutic needs, including infertility. She earned her MA and EDM degrees in psychological counseling at Teachers College, Columbia University. She has worked in private practice, nonprofit organizations, and consultation. And outside of practicing yoga and spending time with her friends and her puppy, Kendall's passionate about advocating for women's reproductive health due to her own challenges with fertility, which we, hope to, or we will spend time, talking more about in a little bit. And thanks for the feedback, Chris. And her goal as a therapist and women's health advocate is to create an emotionally safe space that supports conversations and builds community and awareness around reproductive experiences. So all of that goes along with, again, why we're here today. So again, National Infertility Awareness Week was founded in 1989 by Resolve, and that's the National Infertility Association and largest public awareness campaign that addresses the public health issue of infertility. And it became a federally recognized health observance by the Department of Health and Human Services in 2010. So thinking about the fact that this was, founded in 1989, but it wasn't really recognized, like nationally or on that big of a scale until 2010, kind of, I think, speaks to maybe even why this is important and, how this came about. Thanks, Rakisha. So if you don't know, so many of you are my friend, and maybe Kendall's friends may know, but some of you all who are new to the Selah page may not know that Kendall and I are actually friends, really close friends. We met in college, and we have, went through a lot of things together. I think including what brings us here tonight. So, understanding and learning more about fertility and infertility, reproductive issues, came from my friendship with Kendall. And like I said, I will let her get and go more into that. And just again, one more piece of my introduction, and then I want to just let Kendall, get right into it. You may not know, with Selah Mind, Body, Spirit, I know we've had posts here and there, and we share different posts about fertility, about pregnancy, about moms, about issues related to pregnancy. We celebrated Black Maternal Health Week last week. And so another part of, I think, maternal health that we don't often talk about, or we don't hear about, or I don't think people think about, is actually fertility and reproductive issues. And so Selah is a holistic space, so organization. So we look at not just women who are pregnant or who have been pregnant, but also women who want to be pregnant or who want to have, children, who want to be mothers. And, knowing and understanding that mothering and motherhood comes in different ways. We also don't want to forget and leave out, there's this space of, women and young women, older women who really want to be, when we think about biological mothers in that word or that term. But I think Selah is that space. So we're trying to work to create a safe space. And I think this is one of those ways in which we can do that by, bringing you this information, bringing up topics of relevance, such as this, and just being more in a space to educate people. So with that being said, I want to just let Kendall speak, as it relates to, I guess, this introduction piece that I have not let you speak yet, being aware.
It's okay. I'm also trying to manage a puppy in the background, yes. So I apologize.
But yeah, so I wanted to kind of get all of those things out of the way, the introductions and things. I may have missed something, but no. I wanted to give you a chance, like I said, to introduce yourself if there was anything I left out or anything you wanted to say kind of as we shift into talking more.
Yes, absolutely. No, I just wanted to add, as we couldn't hear originally, but I was going to say that we are sisters, cousins, or whatever.
Yes.
And we have known each other for a very long time. And I feel very grateful and honored to be in this space, to have this moment that we can connect. I feel, as you said, like you've been able to observe a lot of my experience, whether it was in undergrad or actually when I was in grad school and had to come home from an emergency surgery. And so I think that it's really cool that now both of our experiences are being aligned in a space that we're sharing openly about what it's like to have a difficult childbirth, or what it's like to want to have a child and have difficulty even getting pregnant, or the fear if you will even be able to. And I think it's like really just like exciting to have this space where our voices can be together, and also a united support of compassion around this issue.
Yes. Beautifully said. And I think it leads to kind of where I think we are as this part of our broadcast. So yes. I wanted to just kind of, like I said, push it out there, put it out there. In terms of coming on tonight, or us talking about, with it being National Infertility Awareness Week, and, the theme of Infertility Uncovered, yes. What do you want people to know about yourself? Anything as it relates to your experience and kind of what you were saying about your background?
Absolutely. So when me and Linnea, actually, I don't think we knew each other yet, but when I actually was 19 years old, I started to have hemorrhagic, I don't know if I always say that word right, but hemorrhagic cysts that would occur in my ovaries that would lead to them rupturing. And so throughout all of like college up until graduate school, I was always having complications. I was going in and out of different birth controls, trying to manage these cysts that occurred in both ovaries. When I was 24 years old, I actually had an ovarian torsion where I lost the right ovary. So an ovarian torsion is when the ovary twists, it loses circulation. And so it was actually a very traumatic experience, because I didn't know going into the procedure that I would actually lose the ovary. I thought I was going to remove a cyst. And then after that, I was doing extensive hormonal suppression, like meaning being on different types of birth controls, not having cycles, in order to preserve my left ovary. So from about like 24 to 31, I was really focused on preserving this ovary to have a child. I really didn't know much about other parts that would mean or matter when it comes to my fertility. But then after having my third laparoscopy in May of last year, I was told to start seeing a fertility specialist who started to educate me on what an ovarian reserve is, meaning how many eggs that I still had left in order to conceive a child, and my AMH level, which again is like my fertility level of like how much it affects my egg count. And so I actually found out that I had a very low ovarian reserve. So I have very few eggs. And so getting pregnant on my own seems to be a lot more challenging than I even thought up until a year ago. And now I then had to start to foresee and start to think about other ways of becoming a mom or getting pregnant, egg freezing, and also potentially, if it doesn't work, or the navigation of that, like adoption. So just there's so many layers when it comes to trying to conceive a child. And I think sometimes a lot of people don't really think about all of the complexities that can happen to a woman's body. Even just the understanding of what egg counts are, or an ovarian reserve, or an AMH level. And so I just like want to have the space to just like educate people, because as I'm learning this, I think it's really important to share it, because I think a lot of times in school, we are educated on like our bodies through more of an intimate way when it comes to like intercourse, whether we should be abstinent or not, when it comes to STDs and safe sex, or it comes to not getting pregnant and, you know, or having, you know, abortions or other things. But I don't think we ever talk about what our body does when it comes to how women's reproductive like health or conditions play a role in our expectations or a societal construct of what it is to be a woman.
Yeah, I mean, I think you, as you were talking, I'm listening and I'm like, I'm following, and then I'm not following, and then I'm following, and I'm not following. And it's interesting to think about sort of what you're saying, even as a woman, and like us not even understanding, well, what is our body doing, right? So what does it mean to ovulate? What does it mean to say the ovary reserve?
Yes, low ovarian reserve.
Ovarian reserve. See, I'm saying it wrong. But I'm saying all this because I think it speaks to where we are uneducated, and I think that it's, to me, that kind of brings to, you know, this is why this is needed. You know, we need to know, one, the beauty and magnitude of, you know, ourselves, our bodies, and what it can do. And I think almost to where you're saying, there's also limitations in some ways, or some women, right, have certain limitations, things that are out of your control. And so I'm kind of hearing you talk about there are things that through this process you've learned more about your body, as it relates to more, like you said, outside of what you do with other people, what's going on inside.
Yes, exactly. And so it's like really understanding, like you said, that sometimes we expect, I think growing up, we're like conditioned to decide, do we want kids? Do we not want to have kids? If we're going to get married in order to have kids, and just that we can, like, we're conditioned to believe that we're just going to be able to do it. We're going to have this moment, we're going to meet someone, and this expectation that it's just going to happen, but that's not everyone's experience. And so I think that what's important to realize is that sometimes our body communicates, especially in ways that we wouldn't know unless we are impacted by an experience. So a lot of times when you have women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome, so they actually create a lot of more testosterone than they do estrogen. So they may have more weight gain, they may have more facial hair, and so they can go their whole lives feeling like there's this imbalance, but unless they actually go to a certain doctor or like an OBGYN, do blood work, they may not even know what is really happening. Sometimes when you have intercourse, and if you have chlamydia or gonorrhea that's untreated, you can develop scar tissue, and that can create pelvic inflammatory disease, and that can also relate to some inabilities to conceive. There's so many circumstances that happen to us that we as women, our bodies have so many different like nooks and crannies and crevices that we may not always understand what's physically happening. And sometimes our conditions can be intertwined with other factors that we don't even know that it's something reproductive, right? And so I think that a lot of times we just go on about our days, like the fact that like PCOS, as I said, polycystic ovarian syndrome, one of the things that happens is become very lethargic. So you could just think, oh, I'm just always tired, when it really could be a hormonal imbalance, right? With me personally, when I had my first ovarian cyst, I had pressure when I urinated, and it was like, oh, you may have a urinary tract infection. And it wasn't. It was actually until the second day coming back to a hospital for the second time, they finally did an ultrasound and gave me information and showed me that like I had a cyst that was hemorrhaging. And again, like you said, like there's so many different definitions, there's so many different types of cysts that can happen in our bodies that unless you have the experience firsthand, I don't think women really know. And so I think our goal, and what I feel for your page and like what you want to do, and what I'm also passionate about, is giving women those like tools and planting those seeds so they can be educated and prepared for whatever it is that their body is communicating to them.
Wow. Yeah. I see we have a couple more people joining. So just acknowledging, saying hi to you all. Hi, Miss Nancy. Say hi to Jordan and Zion. Hey, Jordan and Zion, if y'all are there. And Tanya. Hey, hi, everybody.
Hi.
And so, yes, I think that one thing that I'm thinking about is, like you were saying, I was there, I think when you were first really finding out all of these things.
Yes.
And so I think what was coming up for me was, what was I thinking about? Sorry, you were talking about, the first time that when you first went to the hospital.
Yes.
I guess I'm curious, before that happened, was there any like signs or any symptoms? Was there anything
Yeah.
else that had happened prior to that could have led for you to know that something might be wrong?
Absolutely. So, and I think that we can all like maybe relate to this. Since I can remember, had horrible periods. So, like, since like 13 to 15, I had extremely like painful cramps. I was
Mm-hmm.
given like a naproxen medication instead of Midol because it didn't work. And that was probably an indicator back then that
Mm-hmm.
something was wrong. But I think that we as women sometimes like are always with that like strong mentality that we like
Mm-hmm.
push through things. And I think that also just like not at the time, if you're not, when you're younger, well, for me, I wasn't like sexually active or anything that would indicate that I should expect that there was anything else going on. But what society tells us that periods are horrible and
Right.
cramps are painful and
Right.
you need to like, medicate. So I think for me, it's like just like that process where I think back then there were indicators that I was probably having some overstimulation in my ovaries and that something could lead up to when they started to finally reach a peak where I
Right.
was starting to create these cysts that would continuously hemorrhage.
Mm-hmm. So
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful to think about. So even as you're saying this, to think about maybe for younger girls or
Yes.
teenagers that are watching, being mindful of, what's going on with your body, with your menstrual
Yes.
cycle. It could be,
Yes.
an indication if it's irregular or
Yes. Yes. Which is a
extremely
lot for
painful.
PCOS,
Yeah,
irregular
right.
like periods. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
if it's extremely painful or like maybe excessive bleeding, I think sometimes it can be embarrassing, or you maybe just think, like you said, we're all supposed to go through it, or, everybody complains about cramps, but
Yes.
thinking about those signs that something might be wrong.
Yes.
And it looks like we have a comment. Sometimes I think that people are scared to speak up as well because we don't want anything to be wrong with us.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yes, 100%. Like, even for me firsthand, like, I know that it was actually hard for me to communicate to my mom about when I was having painful periods. Because,
Mm-hmm.
again, I just made the assumption that that's what
What it's
they're
supposed to
supposed to
be
feel
like.
like.
Yeah.
And so I remember
Hmm.
there was one time that I think I was actually like at my uncle's house and I literally physically couldn't move. And so
Mm.
then I think I realized, or she realized, okay, let's like further, like, assess this. And then
Mm-hmm.
I ended up being prescribed a medication that like helped. And even in college, like I remember before I had my cyst, like the first day of my cycle, I couldn't move. Like I
Mm.
was immobile. Like I literally like did not feel like I could function. I feel like my hormones felt all over the place. Like it
Mm-hmm.
definitely did not feel like myself. But
Right.
again, I think that like you said, like the fact that we are conditioned to not even talk about our cycles as women, we're not supposed to share it because it's
Mm-hmm.
either unladylike or it's like inappropriate. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that we do just kind of hide it, or we are scared. And I definitely felt that I
Yeah.
remember when I first told my mom about the first cyst, and even her saying it could have been like a urinary tract infection. I was terrified. I didn't know even what a urinary tract was,
Right.
but the negative connotation. So I think, yes, there's this fear around being judged if you have something wrong with your body. There is a fear that your body is doing something that could hurt you. There
Right.
is an embarrassment factor. And as I progressed, like through my personal experience, there was definitely feelings of inadequacy in relation to what I perceived and correlated women to be versus what was happening to me as a woman.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of want to shift to, is I think, as it relates to with you sharing about your experience, again,
Yeah.
about what signs we might need to look for.
Yeah.
How does this relate to, or how does this relate to you and your, from what you said, your goal, your passion to be an advocate? Tell us more about that. What what's led you to this path or this journey?
Yeah, so I think that also, as going kind of piggybacking on being like scared, I do think that fertility particularly is a very vulnerable thing to talk about, because I think, again, we as women are just always associated as people that are going to have children. That are already like identified as like being a mom. Like even as kids, like I feel like we play house. We do all of these things that condition us. We have doll babies. Like, you know, we do all of these things that get us to a state of a maternal space, right? And so I think that as beautiful as that can be, I think when you hit a stage, whether it's me like being 19 or specifically 24, when I knew when I lost my ovary, it was going to be a lot more challenging. When I started getting older and really starting to think about relationships and having all of my surgeries and stuff, it really became a very isolating feeling, because a lot of people that I knew were not experiencing what I was experiencing. And a lot of people that I know, especially now at my age, in my 30s, are actually having children or getting to experience what I still hope to experience. And because I'm still at the space where I'm doing my best attempts, whether it's through egg freezing, changing in my diet, and just being hopeful and praying to God, and actually allowing him to be at the forefront of whatever my future, you know, endeavors can be. I think that it can still be a very isolating space. And a lot of times I do think that fertility issues can be met with a little bit of discomfort, because people don't really know what to say. And I think especially when people are going through something that they feel like, you know, they see someone going through something and they can't relate, but they can see how hard it is for someone. It can bring a sense of like wanting to shift someone to a positive, or trying to be supportive by giving options. I mean, one of the things that often is said is like, but you can adopt, or you'll still be a mom. And as helpful as that is supposed to be, it can still be even a more like reminder of, oh, well, I can't do it the way that I like hoped for. And so it feels like more of like a harsher reality than it does always like a support or a different lens to look at. And so I think that my goal, and the reason why it's so important to me, is because I've experienced it, and I've kind of have gone through the ebbs and flows of what it's like to have the supports, but also not feel supported, or to have the stigma around it, or just the complete, you know, fear that, and disappointment, or sometimes anger, and not really knowing how to share it, and not wanting to feel like you are angry, or being scared to express it because people may perceive you as being jealous or envious, or, you know, other things. I think the reason why this is so important to me is because I want people to start to build a space where they can feel safe enough to acknowledge it, that it doesn't seem as negative as you feel it to be. There's sometimes that like inadequacy feeling, or a rejected feeling. And so I think it's really important to create a space where people can see a face of someone who can say, look, I'm just like you. I have not figured this out. It's still a process for me, but I want to be as supportive as I can.
Right. And so, you know, I think that's, you speak to just a lot as it relates to, I think in general, like you said, a lot of this is about womanhood, and like some of the, like these things are unique to being a female or a woman. And then, like you said, then you have these different categories where there are some women who, again, may have these challenges with fertility. And so for you, it's through your own experience, it allows you, you've had personal insight and personal experience. And so you want to be able to advocate for other women and help them to find a safe space, kind of recognizing from where you're coming from and from your own experience. So I see a few questions. I think I'll come to those in a second. I just wanted to kind of get to, for you, I guess, why do you think this week is important? So again, this National Infertility Awareness Week, you know, that we're celebrating.
I think
or acknowledging.
I think it's really important, because I don't think that infertility or fertility, and even reproductive and women's health, is always acknowledged. I don't think that we talk about it a lot. I actually wasn't fully aware about this being National Infertility Week until a space and a platform that wanted me to speak actually shared it with me. And so even someone who's been through this for as long as I have, like over a decade, I didn't even know. And so I think that really spoke volumes to be like, wow, like this doesn't feel like something that is publicized enough or talked about enough for people to really be aware. And I think that awareness is like really, really important because people are going through it all the time. Like even how so many people were surprised that like Michelle Obama had to have IVF treatments for her 2 children. It's something that we don't talk about until I feel, which is valid in certain ways, because I feel like when you're going through it, there is that shame, there is that guilt, there's that embarrassment, and you have to be ready. Because it is a very vulnerable thing to own, and to really, you have to go through your own process of understanding what it means for you personally. But I think that the more that if we could bring awareness, the more that we could have these weeks, that maybe it wouldn't take so long for people to feel comfortable to acknowledge and to actually have and build the supports in the communities that they need around it.
Right. And it's, you know, I think going along with what you're saying, again, I learned about this through you, like you say, your experience. So kind of like I said, being, you know, in the space with you where you were going through this. So that was kind of when I first learned. And then over time, there would be a female here that would say, oh, I have ovarian cysts. Oh, I have a friend who, like, I'd never heard anyone, like you said, I've never heard anyone share about that. And then the next person would say it. And it's like, oh, like you said, this is something that people experience, you know, like you said, why aren't we being educated about it? Or again, here's some signs to look for. So I think just like you said, the education piece, which is what we're trying to do today. And again, I think what they're doing this week is acknowledging and recognizing that, again, people are experiencing these challenges. And, you know, I think it goes along again with the theme, infertility uncovered. Like we need to, you know, take off the shades, take off that veil that covers it and makes it, like you said, this shameful thing, like being able to acknowledge and recognize it happens. It's a real thing. You know, there's some support, I think, going along with one of the questions, you know, have you been able to find support groups? Like what are there places that you found that, okay, yeah, this is a place I can go to or talk with someone, or people who have experiencing similar challenges?
Absolutely. So I think it first started as more of an individualized connection. And I feel like almost like ordained, or like for me personally, because of my faith, like I feel like God started to place people in my life. And so I remember actually before I lost my ovary, this always stood out to me because I had a career counselor. I had just finished grad school, and I had a career counselor who was helping me with like getting myself together so that I could apply for jobs. And I think I mentioned to her that I had like ovarian like issues. And at the time I still had both ovaries. And I remember her sharing with me that she had lost one of hers when she was like younger. And it took her a month in the hospital to recover. And I remember thinking like, okay, that's horrible, but that will not, like, that's not going to happen to me. Like that's like really bad. And then when it happened, I couldn't stop thinking about her. And before that happened, when I was actually still in grad school and going through just like the process of always like having the sister or hemorrhaging. I remember being in class and hemorrhaging in class and having all of like my classmates having to stop and people having to help me. And like one of my other friends at the time riding shotgun and an ambulance with me when I was first ever had my cyst. One of my first guy friends rode an ambulance with me as well. So I think at first it started to be like individual, like little experiences. And then I would find out, like I met people who had hysterectomies at like a young age, or so I would just like start to build and talk to people. And it wasn't until, or like how you said, I would have friends who would then have friends and be like, oh my gosh, like this person, you know, just told me that they went through this too. So like that would be like almost just like by hearsay. And then it started to really be an experience of now at this age really feeling like at the crux.
I think I lost you. Oh, you're there. Let's see. It looks like lost her. Let's see if I can. Oh, there we go.
Do you have me back?
Yeah. Hey.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So, as I was saying, at the crux of my fertility and like really
She's back.
being, I'm back. You hear me? I'm back. At the crux of my fertility and really going through it, I finally decided to go to therapy and actually specialize and have, as a therapist, see a therapist, and actually go to a place where I had someone who specializes in fertility. I've been in therapy for other things. I'd already know that I had to do work on other parts of my life, but it took me to be about 31 where I finally said, okay, I'm ready to focus on this. And I was scared to focus on it because I knew how vulnerable it would be. And so after that, I decided that I really wanted to do it. And even as a therapist, one of my specialties is infertility. And I think it's sometimes hard because a lot of times I've actually had women who were going through it as well and asked me if I could refer them to support groups. And they're not really known. And especially in New York, I feel like as big as the city is, you could see more sometimes in hospitals, but it's not always a safe, comfortable space in a hospital setting. And there's certain kinds of days that are not feasible for women. So I think that also can be an issue. So I think that those things play a role. But yes, for me personally, I've been continuing to build my support. There are times where there are people that don't understand. And I think not only is it important to have a support group, but it's important to know that sometimes people won't get it. And that as much as you want people to understand, as much as you're craving for people to just be supportive or to be compassionate, that sometimes they're not going to, and really give yourself that, because that is really what's going to also make a difference in the process.
Gotcha. So I'm hearing for you, it's been throughout the process, the way in which you've gotten support has varied. So not necessarily formalized support groups, but having friends, then kind of learning about other people's experience through friends, kind of through meeting people, and then more recently just through therapy. So getting your own personal therapy, and you being, like you said, a therapist, also getting a therapist. So this kind of leads to, I guess, where I was trying to think about kind of in what you're sharing, how we continue to, again, stay with this infertility uncovered. So I guess let me get to this question actually. Because it can go to that. Do you feel that you have had lots of support being a Black woman? So do you think that is there any, maybe, do you feel like your experience has been different? Have you talked to people of maybe other ethnicities, or
I think it's harder being a Black woman. I think it's way harder being a Black woman. Even with my need to recently freeze my eggs, I think that the financial resources, the way that egg freezing is catered to white women who have money, because it costs over thousands of dollars to do. I think that even when I was at hospitals and emergency rooms, I think I was treated very dismissively because I was Black. When I lost my ovary, I went to the same hospital 4 times, saw the same doctor 4 times, and she kept dismissing me about my concerns. And then once my other doctor, who I knew since I was 16, I went to Maryland for the procedure, and I had already lost the ovary. I definitely feel like there was one time when I went into another emergency surgery, and the doctor, the first thing she asked me was how many miscarriages or abortions had I already had before even looking at my chart. And I definitely think that was a racial thing. I also think for me, because I'm single and I'm a Black woman, I think even the fact that I'm freezing my eggs for the purpose that I have such a low egg count, and that I need to do that in order to potentially, I'm still have hope for God or any other part, but I think that also women make assumptions of me because I'm not in a relationship, because I am a Black single woman. So I definitely think there is a lot of stigma related to being a Black woman and having issues with fertility.
And I think that kind of goes along with just in general, what we've talk about and have shared with say as it relates to Selah, recognizing and acknowledging that there are some racial disparities and challenges as it relates to race and ethnicity, and how, many times Black and brown people in general, but, particularly women, can be treated differently in our society. Just, again, this is just a known thing. I don't think it's you know, what we think, or we
Yeah.
assume. I think it's been, there have been incidences in which we know and recognize that Black women experience, you know,
Yes.
are treated differently. And actually, I think it goes along with what this week is about. They, one of the along with the themes Infertility Uncovered, one
Yeah.
of the educational pieces that they want people to know is that it is harder for certain people. So again,
Yeah.
when you talk about race, when you talk about
Yeah.
socioeconomic class, so
And resources. Yeah. Hmm.
resources,
Hmm.
insurance,
Yes.
so all of those things like makes it more difficult as we're talking about fertility
Yeah.
and reproduction.
Yes.
So like you said, if you're unable to conceive on your own, but you can, maybe you can be successful with IVF, if you can't
Yes.
afford to get it, then again, now you are back to, you know, where you started. And so I think that's
Yes.
another part of us uncovering, like, well,
Yes.
is infertility just my body can't recreate, or is it there are
Yes.
certain barriers
Yes.
as it relates to what's, you know, in place in society that don't allow me access to,
Yes.
again, like Michelle Obama, or I guess
Yes.
Beyonce, and people we
Yes.
know that have shared their stories.
Absolutely. 100%. I definitely think that that plays a huge role in your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Or even also like
mhm,
something else I was thinking too, like even when we were in undergrad, and I know that there's a specific hospital that we like that was biased for an emergency room, was actually known for like stigmatizing and always assuming that like if someone of color had a concern, that it was more, especially in relating to anything reproductive, that they were just going to label you with like an STD or something. And that's
mhm,
exactly what happened to me. Like I went the first time, they didn't do an ultrasound, they did cultures that were negative, and then they told me I had pelvic inflammatory disease. And I remember the next day my brother coming to see me, he's like, you don't have this. And I was like, well,
mhm,
that's what they told me. The next day we came back, they did an ultrasound and they saw I had a cyst. So I
yeah,
definitely think that being a woman of color can also be a lot of stigmatizing before you can even share your voice, before you can
mhm,
even communicate a need. There's already an assumption about you, and
right,
that can be a huge barrier to your process and your health and your well-being.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess kind of thinking about being mindful of time as well,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
what do you want people to know about, you know, the experience of living with these challenges as it relates to fertility, reproduction?
Yeah.
Is there something that you want to kind of leave people with, you know, as we kind of think about us, this, what we're talking about today and this
Yeah.
week and all of those things?
Absolutely. That you'll never be prepared to, sorry for my dog.
It's okay.
You'll never be prepared for something like this. It can be a process that creates a lot of fear. It can be a process where you feel hopeless. There's moments where you feel hopeful. It
Hmm.
has given me one of my biggest gifts, because I think that I feel personally, as much as this has been very hard for me, and as much as it's been something that I have been very angry about at times, have been felt very unheard, have felt invisible, have felt very isolated, it
Hmm.
has also allowed me to really figure out how to be resilient,
Hmm.
how to love myself, and how to love my body,
Hmm.
even when it doesn't do what I expect it to do, and realizing that expectations and understanding are two different things. And the more that I'm able to get an understanding of what my body is capable of, and
Hmm.
giving it that compassion, I think I can give that to any area of my life. I think that I can be so much more open to whatever occurs in any experience I go through based on this experience, and to also be patient with it, to be honest about any parts of it, to allow it to be a process, and to figure out what I can create from it. And that is this advocacy, that is a passion, that is a voice, that is unconditional love, that is realizing I can still be nurtured and be a nurturer, even if it's not maternal yet, and that I can still have maternal energy by wanting to just collaborate with anyone and still be happy for those who can give life in a way that I'm not sure I can yet, but to still not let it just completely be my life, but still be very active about what it means to want this to be a space where people can have an avenue and a platform and feel safe and it's made me really understand the importance of emotional safety. It's
Mm-hmm.
made me understand the importance of community, and it's made me understand, again, trust in myself and my body and other people, and figuring out what energy I can put into this and other areas of my life, and energy, and just the mind, body, and spirit, and wanting to be whole. And I've always wanted my body to work and be healed to what I want it to be, and not having to heal through the fact that it is what it is, and that is still enough.
Yeah. So, as we close,
I just saw advocating.
yes, advocating for my body sounds like a book title. Yes. Coin that, keep that.
Yes.
But it's actually, I'm glad that you said the things you shared, because I was actually going to ask, what are some things you learned about yourself? That was kind of my going into the last question, but you actually answered those things. And I just want to say, not just, I guess, as, representing Selah Mind, Body, Spirit, as a therapist, as a woman, and again, a woman who has not experienced what you experienced, but also as your friend, that I am extremely proud of you for being willing to use your voice, to share your story, to not be, to be unafraid, to uncover, right? Infertility uncovered, to lift the veil and share, here's my real true story, here's my truth. Again, I'm unashamed to say that I have been angry at times. There were times where, I was in pain and didn't ask for help, or didn't get the help I needed, or support I may have needed. There are moments where, and this is, again, I think as a friend, just knowing and recognizing that you've had other moments of questioning or whatever that is, but at the same time, being able to have this positive outlook that, I can take this experience and share it with others. I can be an advocate, and I found my passion along the way. And so I'm just honored to be your friend and to hear you share, and yes, being transparent. And for your transparency, and to allow this space, so Selah, to be that space in which you can share your experience with the world, because that we're sharing this with the public. So I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you in terms of this journey, and what's next for you. I'm thankful again for you sharing about this week, and I think that we are, doing the work. And so I am excited about what's next for you, and, as you continue this journey. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, and it means so much to be able to collaborate with you. I mean, we've always said that we are sisters.
Yes.
That there's always a reason, and I think that although we always knew that God was at the forefront of our relationship, I think it's beautiful to see where He's bringing us and the space that He's allowing us. And although we do have different perspectives in certain ways, from you being a new mom but having a very traumatic experience, to me being traumatized by my own perceptions of if I can or cannot be one. I think that the way that we can still hold space for each other, the way that we're able to be there for each other. I mean, you were there for me and fed me soup, and that is something I've always been so grateful for. When I lost my ovary, and walked me to the exit sign, and I feel like it's just so refreshing to know in this space that people exist, love is still present, that it's still a space that we can hold each other up and uplift each other and be each other's biggest supports and advocates. And so I appreciate being seen by you, having this space where you're giving me the space to share, and it means so much. And that's a part of what matters through this process, is knowing the people that will allow you to share it, will be supportive of it. And I just love you to death, and I thank you so much.
Love you to life.
Yes,
No,
love you to life.
But I, again, appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. Like I said, I know the time is getting late, but you all will have a chance to, watch this if you weren't able to watch live. And it looks like, again, there are comments here and there, so I'll respond. And maybe Kendall, if there's any questions you have for her, it seems like she would be willing to reply and respond. So thanks again, and good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.